G'day Scrap Time viewers, my name is James of James Burke Creative, and we're at the Photocentric booth at Creativation 2020. So last year I shared with you my concept stamp set, which we actually did take into production, and now we're all having fun with. This, since last year, I brought out a doll parts, which is kind of like a companion set to a lot of the other builder sets that we have that kind of circulate. So we've got here like a face base, which is kind of, you know, to be finished. And then you've got your concepts, which is that building really interesting ideas with your stamps. And the doll parts is kind of like a ball jointed doll, just deconstructed. So you can put it back together again. And these samples here were actually all made with exactly the same stamps. It was this face here, this generic face from the face base. And then it was the doll parts body just here. So I'm going to quickly stamp you through one. And again, this is stamping illustrations, so I'm not so much one for single-use stamps. I like things to be used over and over and over again, and I like to bridge that gap between mixed media and kind of art, just because I live in that art journaling world. I'm gonna ghost stamp this. We'll see if I can get it first try. Oh, there we go. I'm using some distress ink, and I'm just ghost stamping it because, as with all of the illustrations, I kind of want the body and the face and all of the base, the blueprint, to disappear once I'm drawing over the top of it. And the reason I like the body is we've done so many of the faces and they're so much fun to do, but some people just really want to finish it. And my own personal passion kind of started with fashion illustration. And as much as I love to draw all these angular and stylized bodies, sometimes I don't really want to spend all the time drawing the body. Sometimes I just want to have fun drawing the fashion. But there's no real way to cheat it unless you're going to print it out, which, you know, then you're kind of at the mercy of what you can find online. So this base of a body is designed to be stamped out tons and tons and tons of different ways. It is a little complicated. I'm going to say it's not for people that have never drawn anything in their life ever, or never used a stamp set. There are some other, I think the face base is kind of good for that, or the concept stamp set's kind of good for beginners in that way. But I also like that this is a product for people who may be a bit more competent with stamping and with illustration, because even though I design these products, I'm also a consumer of them. And sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of a gap in the market for people who want a bit of a challenge, who maybe have already, you know, extended themselves in one area like illustration or painting or something. So this is how quickly they stamp out. You can see I haven't even stamped the rest of the body, just because I don't want to bore you for 50 years. But this is a sample I did earlier, and yeah, you can get a ton of different variations on the body shapes. Like I said, all of these were done with the bodies. It just depends on how you render them. Sometimes I'll just trace the outlines and add my stuff on top. Sometimes I'll completely re-alter where things are. If you look closely, you can still see the top of that head is stamped out there. This is the body, this is the hips. So you can see the shapes, because ultimately that's what drawing is, right? It's just shapes on shapes on shapes. So these stamps can just be interesting shapes to draw with. And this is, and why I like this as well is because one of the techniques I really like to do is a dry brush ink technique with fashion illustration, which I think looks really, really stylish. I have another example here. I've got a big example here. Something I prepared earlier. Just for pure fun, I love to play with them. So you can see all the stamping underneath. These are just a mixture of the sets you see up there. Everything was stamped out, so they're all just shapes I've just run over with a brush pen, or you can see literally the stamping underneath there. Here we have something a bit more fun. Some work, some don't, and some I use as inspiration to redraw or repaint at a later date, so they themselves become the concept art or inspiration for something else. Something that I might not think of, like if you told me to sit down and draw, I might never come up with this. But having stamped it out, it's like playing with Lego. You're putting it all together and you're in that puzzle play collage space. It's a different part of your brain. And here is where I just get to have fun. You know, it would take a long time for me to sit down and draw all of those bodies out. And I personally I don't want to do it every time. I know that sounds terrible, but I just don't. Sometimes I just want to get the ink out and play with it. And this is a really difficult technique to get right first go, so you really don't want to waste an hour drawing the body out just to get it wrong. So I'll quickly demo that for you. I've got a cheap ink from the dollar store, and I've got a cheap brush from the dollar store, and I'm just going to push this out into a bit of a triangular shape from the hips.
Upside down even.
Upside down even, yeah. The results may vary when they're upside down. I think I've got the triangular shape down, but we'll see. So yeah, it's just a fun way to get yourself illustrating without that pressure of thinking, well, I don't know how to draw that. And bodies is one of those things that if you don't study anatomy for years and years and years, it might always seem very daunting. And personally, it's just not my jam to go that deep with anything. I learn what I need to know and then I go and start playing with it. So those are kind of the products I design to help bridge that gap and get people doing those things that they say they can't do, because I've seen so many people say, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that. And if you give them a stamp, you know, suddenly they're illustrators. So it's a great way to bridge that gap of confidence and then work on it. Ultimately, I would love for people to get to the point where they feel like the stamps aren't necessary for them to even try anymore. Where they pick up the stamps and they think, you know what, I've used this one enough. I think I know where the face is. I think I know where the arms go. I can just use this to reposition something. But ultimately to use it as a tool as well. I'm just going to give her a very high fashion bang that covers her eyes. So we don't have to deal with those. I'm going to just shade down one side of her face as she's got a really dark black shadow. And then just down one side of the arm. So hyper stylized kind of a look. And just using the brush to do all the work. Something super quick that I wouldn't have to spend hours and hours and hours laboring over. And I can have all the fun of doing this without thinking, oh, I did such a good job on the drawing, now I'm gonna ruin it with this one brush stroke. Because trust me, with this, one brush stroke would ruin the whole thing. I haven't even seen it yet. Is it good? Oh, she's fine. We'll accept that one. But for this here as well, I like to do a lot more of the abstract techniques as well. So we can paint over the top. You can see it's still stamped underneath there, and grab something as simple as a pencil and just pull out the tiniest of details. Almost like your illustrations are floating in that painting. So you don't have to pick up on everything. There's not, you don't stamp it out and think, oh, well, I have to make sure I redraw every line. You can simply pick up just the lines that you want, just the ones that stand out to you or the ones that you want to accentuate. And I just personally love playing with it. I think as an illustrator, even though I know I could draw this stuff out, like I said, there's just times where I want to have the play, and the play for me isn't sitting down and drawing all the base. It's not drawing all the blueprint. It's not having half an hour of getting my rulers out and making sure that eye is on the same plane as that eye. And yeah, that to me, if I can just stamp it out, I know these are very stylized proportions, but like I've done in the past, I can simply grab one of the other parts of the stamp set. Like this circle is just a circle, even though it says it's a hip joint, it's just a circle. So if I wanted to move that eye down, I can use parts of that stamp to remap out where I want to draw things. And that's how these eyes here, all these circular eyes, became that. This is the hip joint, just in that eye space. Because this stamp, technically I pulled that in 2017, and since then my proportions, my preference for where the eyes sit on the face is actually lowered a little bit. So typically I'll stamp this one out and I'll put the eyes lower. And I think that's one of those fun things that you get to play with in stamping an illustration that you might miss if you were always sitting down to start fresh from scratch every single time. So I like to think of it as a creative exercise, even though some of them I think can definitely look more finished. For me, it's more getting that part of my brain active, getting myself into that abstract place, not really caring about the results, because if they don't work out, I can stamp it again in like a minute and it'll be totally fine to do it again and again and again and again. And yeah, maybe using it for inspiration for an actual piece later, or just leaving it as it is. I mean, like I said, I live in art journals, so there's a ton of examples through this book I just quickly threw together for the show, where I've used a ton of the stamps to play through ideas and concepts. Like if I'm teaching a class or it's coming up to Halloween and I just want to know, you know, some fun YouTube video that I might want to put together, I'll go through and stamp out a bunch of concepts and they'll just live in my art journals. some I'll redo, some I'll even just use, like this is a piece of ephemera from my die cut set, and I'll just put a body on it. I think it's a great way to get people to start drawing bodies as well, since I know they are something a little bit difficult, and it is technically a really stylized looking doll, but the idea is the same, the anatomy is the same. We're just breaking it up into manageable parts, and I always say to people, if you don't want to do the whole body at the start, at first, just do a little bit. Just do from the shoulders to the waist, or to the hips. Start there, add everything else in later. But we do have a YouTube channel, just James Burke, and we do a lot of demos and tutorials using the stamp sets over there, so I can take you through from start to finish how to create things like these witches here, and even certain illustrating styles, like instead of actually drawing the whole thing, just using lines to fill out the body. But yeah, so this is all just fun to look at. This is actually the last 5 years of my work since I started watching Scrap Time videos and became a mixed media artist myself. So I have you to thank for this. But yeah, this is stamping and illustration. The doll parts are the ones that we've released since the last time you spoke with us. And yeah, we look forward to releasing more throughout the year. We're going to be doing collections this year, themed collections. So that'll be fun. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to give our video a thumbs up and subscribe to Scrap Time videos for all the Creativation 2020 coverage.